Hey everyone, Lefko here, and on the first episode of the Afterglow podcast, we're going to be checking out Chrono Trigger. It's a really big one. We're coming out of the gates swinging hard, and I will see you all after the music break. Oh man, this game competes with Final Fantasy VI as my favorite Super Nintendo role-playing game, and it's really a very good possibility as my favorite role-playing game of all time. But before we discuss it, I want to go back a little bit, more than a little bit actually. I got into role-playing games with Dragon Warrior. We got free through a Nintendo Power subscription, and I really, really got into it. And then on a whim, I had rented Final Fantasy One on the NES in the game store, and it was like a deeper Dragon Warrior, and I loved it. So I was always on the lookout for a really, really good RPG. But I really lived in the Midwest in Indiana. Not a whole lot of people in the RPGs in that area. I was kind of a nerdy kid to begin with, so I was quiet. I kept to myself. So if it wasn't in a gaming mag at the time, I didn't know about it. So Chrono Trigger slipped me by. I ended up finding it at a rental store in town. Rented it, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so good. And whenever I first rented it, I got to the part where you time traveled to 600 AD and you saved the queen. You got her back to the modern time, and then you warped to the future time period, and then I had to return the game. Now, here's the horrible thing about game rentals, especially back then. Your game save is on the cartridge, so you return the game, you return your game save, which means next time you're at the game, your game save is probably gone. The interesting part about that, though, is that you can explore other people's game saves and see how far they got in the game. Well, I explored a little bit. I don't believe anyone had actually beaten the game in any of the saves back whenever I was running it. But I did explore around a little bit as someone who'd gotten a little further. I think it was the second or third go-round. You went to 600 AD, where you got the frog teammate. So nowhere near beating the game or anything. But after that, I believe it was a few months later, the game disappeared from the rental store. I guess someone just never brought it back. But I had asked for it for Christmas. Unfortunately, I got Jurassic Park on the Super Nintendo instead. Never got a copy of Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo at a young age. So I really enjoyed the game. I even ordered the strategy guide from Nintendo Power just to read about it. I loved this game, but couldn't find it anywhere. So fast forward a little bit, I eventually got a PC. It was a Gateway 366 megahertz. I think it had like either 8 or 16 megs of RAM, somewhere in that area, maybe 32. But it was on this PC that I discovered emulators. And first I messed about with NES emulators and really got into them. And then I got into Super Nintendo emulation. Now, at the time, Super Nintendo emulation was not perfect. So I attempted to emulate Chrono Trigger, but unfortunately, it only kind of sort of worked. The transparency layers in the emulator did not read as transparency. They were hard, which means that whenever, let's say you were looking at a really foggy area. On the actual Super Nintendo hardware, you would still see your character through the fog. Well, in the emulator, you just saw the fog. You didn't see anything behind it. There was no transparency whatsoever. So I think it was like maybe 3 or 6 months later, there was an update for the emulator that fixed the transparency issue. Now, I had messed about with it a little bit. I had disabled transparencies completely, which allowed me to play the game a little bit, but I really wanted the full effect, so I kind of stopped playing it. But then that patch came out, and I tore into Chrono Trigger. The first time I beat Chrono Trigger was actually on the not SNES 9X. It was the ZSNES emulator. I actually remember the joystick I was using at the time was a Microsoft Sidewinder, not the stick. They had made a gamepad Sidewinder that was USB. I believe it had 6 face buttons, a trigger on the left, a trigger on the right, and a really nice D-pad, I thought at least. But that was the first time I had beaten Chrono Trigger. And I had a blast with it. I did not find all 13 endings. Spoiler alert, there's 13 endings for the game. Did not find them all, but I did explore a few of them, and I believe I grinded up to level 99 for at least my main party, which in my main party I had Chrono, Marl, and Magus. I've still not beaten the game without having Magus in my party. There is a point in the game where Magus, where you think is a major villain, you have the opportunity to either slay him or have him join your party, and I always have him join. But we're going to fast forward just a bit more on this. Emulation was the main way I played the game for the longest time, and it had gotten re-released, and at the time I was in the retro gaming a whole lot. I was building my NES collection up, but it had been re-released for the Nintendo DS, and at this time I was living in another town. It was another small town. They had a video rental store that me and my wife would go on to, but they had a small area where they would sell new games and movies. And lo and behold, there's a copy of Chrono Trigger for the DS. So the first time I had actually owned a copy of Chrono Trigger was for the Nintendo DS. And that thing was beautiful. It had the new cutscenes that they had done on the PlayStation 1, which I'd actually missed the Chrono Trigger release on the PS1. Go figure, because at the time I actually did have a PlayStation when it came out, but I never saw the Final Fantasy, I think it was Final Fantasy Anthology on PS1 that had the game. Never saw it anywhere. I was a big fan of Final Fantasy VII at the time, but again, never saw that anthology. So the first time I had actually physically owned it was on that DS version. I remember there was a small poster inside. I've probably still got it somewhere. I'd have to dig it out. But that is a big, big prized piece of my collection. And I ended up rebeating the game on DS, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. I loved the dual screen setup. Just an amazing setup. To me, it's still probably the best way to play Chrono Trigger if you're looking to play it today, is to get the DS. But moving on, as I was collecting games, I eventually finally got a copy of Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo, and I replayed it on there. I didn't beat it there, but it was kind of, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but it felt nice to finally have it on the console that I discovered it on. And again, this is an eBay version of the game. It don't have any writing on it. It don't have any rental stickers or anything like that. So who knows the history of that cartridge now it's in my collection. I can tell you the history of that DS version I have. But unfortunately, I can't for the Super Nintendo version that I have, other than the fact that I got it off eBay probably 15 to 20 years ago. That being said, the game got re-released again on Android. Of course, I got it there, dabbled with it a bit, but I always went back to the DS version until the Steam version came out. Um, Whenever the Steam version came out, I did buy it, and it got a lot of controversy over the font that they used. I didn't care. I believe there was a patch that patched a better font in, but it was a version of Chrono Trigger with cloud saves, and that was enough for me. I bought it on Steam, and I actually beat the thing again on the original GPD win, and I still have that thing floating around. But I'd beaten it, the main game at least, on there. But recently I came back to it, and I beat all the bonus content that came with the re-release, all the new dungeons and the new super boss at the end. But I went through that on my Steam Deck whenever it came in, and it was a blast. Like, I was really shocked at how well it holds up, and especially on the deck. Like, it was great being able to have my cloud save from where I beat it. Like, I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago on the GPD win. I could pick right back up where I had left off. And it was just an awesome experience to finally play and beat it that one last time. Until, of course, I end up going through and replaying it again. I'm tempted to do a New Game Plus. Tempted to maybe even stream that in my YouTube channel. I don't stream games in there very often because I feel like there's a bunch of people that do that in a lot more professional way than I can do it. I've done a few, though. I think I've done Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Legend of Zelda. Chrono Trigger would be a big one, but it is a fairly short RPG, especially if you go into New Game Plus mode where you get to keep your levels and your equipment and whatnot. But it is just a phenomenal game. If you're a fan of role-playing games, surely you already know of it and played it. But if somehow you have not, I highly recommend you go back and check it out. But that is my history with Chrono Trigger. So I'm interested in hearing what yours is. You can email me at leathco@gmail.com, as LEATHCO @gmail.com with your thoughts in the game. And if you email me, tell me what you think of this format. Tell me what you think of this small show. Tell me your memories. Maybe I'll throw your memories on in another segment in the next episode. Anyway, until next time, we're going to go ahead and sign off with some more Chrono Trigger music. And I will see you on the next episode of Afterglow.